It's 1300 hours GMT. That's 3 p.m. in Gaza. Qatar has confirmed Hamas and Israel have agreed on a temporary truce in the besieged territory. This development comes after weeks of negotiations mediated by Qatar alongside the US and Egypt. The Israeli government approved the deal after a lengthy cabinet meeting and despite divisions among ministers. The pause is expected to start on Thursday morning. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the agreement does not mean the war will stop. And a statement released by the Qatari Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the social media platform X says the state of Qatar announces the success of its joint mediation efforts undertaken with Egypt and the United States between Israel and Hamas, resulting in an agreement for a humanitarian pause. The starting time of the pause will be announced within the next 24 hours and last for 4 days, subject to extension. Well, here's what we do know about the deal. It involves the release of 50 Israeli women and child captives in exchange for a temporary 4-day ceasefire. Israel is willing to pause hostilities for a further day for every 10 additional captives released by Hamas. Under the deal, it's believed about 300 trucks of humanitarian aid, including fuel, will be allowed into the Strip during the 4 days. Israel has agreed not to fly drones for 6 hours a day in the north. Hamas was concerned Israeli air operations would be used to gather further intelligence during the temporary ceasefire. Also in the agreement, we believe about 150 Palestinian women and children will be released from Israeli jails. Israel has made it clear no one convicted of murder will actually be freed. Well, during the temporary ceasefire, Israeli media say Palestinians who fled to southern Gaza will not be allowed to return to their homes in the north. And the most depressing part of all, Israel says it will resume its bombardment as soon as the temporary truce is over. Gershon Baskin is a former Israeli negotiator who's now the Middle East director at International Communities Organization. He warns some complications might arise from implementing the deal.
The deal isn't done until it's done, and there are so many complications that could be involved, particularly with regard to the ceasefire, opportunities for either side to shoot at the other, opportunities for Israel to collect intelligence information. I mean, just imagine what would happen if the Israelis suddenly discovered the location of Yahya Sinwar or other leaders from the Hamas command. Would they wait or would they go and take action? If there are Palestinians from the north of Gaza who are relocated in the south now, decide to use the next 5 days, 4 or 5 days to try and go back to their homes, and there are parades of hundreds of Palestinians walking by foot, are the Israelis going to allow them? How will they stop them? We know that when Hamas will release the hostages, they will probably use multiple convoys of identical vehicles, while Israel will try to trace the location of where these hostages might have been held. There are all kinds of difficulties and complications that could happen. We have to keep our fingers crossed and pray that it all goes smoothly, because if it does, there could be a 5th day and a 6th day. Not all the women and all the children are being released, and not all the women and children prisoners are being released. So there's an opportunity to add on to the existing agreement without having to renegotiate something new, which will be, again, more difficult.
Well, we have correspondents across the region covering the story. Zain Basravi is in Nablus in the occupied West Bank. Rory Challens is in occupied East Jerusalem on the political divisions in Israel. But first, let's start with Hashim Ahlabara. He's here to discuss the diplomatic side of things. So, Hashim, there is a big question, of course. We understand this truce is supposed to come into effect tomorrow. That's at least what's being reported. But according to what you understand from the Qatari mediators, was there a specific time fixed in this truce deal?
That is the general consensus, that it is going to happen tomorrow. They do understand this is a crucial moment, extremely the most delicate, and this explains the cautious optimism that you can see in the statements made by senior Qatari officials.
When you say this is what you're talking about Qatari officials. This is what Qatari officials understand, right?
Exactly, and the cautious optimism about the first few hours of the deal are going to be the most decisive moment.
Okay, hang on, hold that thought. I'm going to come to you in a minute about but since we've got you on the point of when this starts, I think it's an important question on the minds of a lot of people, Palestinians waiting to see if they'll get some relief, and also perhaps families of Israeli captives. Let's bring in Rory Challens. As I said, he's live for us. And Rory, what I want you to reflect on, what Hashim said was, that's the understanding of the Qatari mediators. Is that the general understanding and the signals we're getting from Israeli officials, is that this truce is going to start tomorrow? Is everyone on the same page here or not, in other words, Rory?
Yeah, they're pretty much on the same page that tomorrow is going to be the first day in which you will see a lull in the fighting. As to exactly what time that's going to occur, well, the Israeli media has been reporting that they think it's going to be about 6:30 a.m. local time. That's slightly different from what Hamas have been saying, which is they think it's going to be happening at about 10 a.m. local time. So a difference of, a few hours, but still tomorrow morning, tomorrow a.m. is when pretty much everyone thinks that this is going to kick in earnest. You have also, of course, the timings for the first release of captives and when that's going to happen. There is a belief that we might see a list being produced by Hamas of the first 10 or so captives given to the Israelis, and that again, tomorrow you might see the first captives making their way back to Israel.
Okay, that's a good point. I'm going to come to Zain in a moment, but Hashim, I want you to pick up on the point you were just about to make about the first few hours are crucial. What happens there?
Now, if you see the statements made by the Qatari officials, Qatar's Prime Minister and the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also Mohammed Al-Khalifi, who is the top negotiator in the Qatari team that has been negotiating this deal, they're basically insisting on the need for this to move forward, saying that the path forward is going to be extremely delicate for a simple reason. As we speak now, and this is according to a senior Hamas official, the list of both the captives and the Palestinian prisoners have been exchanged. So Hamas is looking into the final list as we speak now before saying, let's go ahead. And this is the same thing for the Israelis. When they officially announced the ceasefire, this is where it gets extremely, extremely delicate. You have the southern part of Gaza, and this is where some of the most important movements is going to start to happen when it comes to members of Hamas taking the captives all the way towards a certain points to be handed over to ICRC
hold that thought,
people.
because I can see, Hashim, we're getting into the process, which I do want to get into in a minute, but you touched on an important point there about looking through the lists, agreeing on those names. And we've got to bring in Zain, because Zain is standing by live for us in Nablus, and we understand, Zain, when Palestinian prisoners are released, they're going to the West Bank, right? That's the understanding. How crucial will it be that those who are released are the people that the Palestinians are hoping will be released?
I mean, Sammy, what you're talking about is a numbers game that is not in favor of any of the Palestinians, either on or off the list. We've been speaking to members of, family members of those that have been held from Nablus. 8 of the names on the lists that have been making their way between the Israelis and the Palestinians, 8 of them are women from Nablus. The total number of women being held in Israeli custody is around 89. Only 33 names of women are on that list, and even out of those 33, it has not been confirmed to any of the families by the Palestinian Prisoner Society or any other official body whether they will definitely be released or not. So here it's a waiting game. We've spoken to people who are pessimistic. They've been here before with other family members. You can trace generational trauma in the occupied West Bank, across the occupied territories, in the sense that multiple generations of people have been imprisoned in Israeli jails. They've been here before, and they say they won't believe it until they see it. We've spoken to others who say they're very, very optimistic. We were just in the home of a woman named Tahrir, 29 years old. Her parents say that her uncle was in prison when she was born. That's how she got her name Tahrir, meaning freedom or to set free. And she will, if she gets out, be meeting a niece who was born when she was in prison. Okay. So it is a very intrinsic issue. People being in prison is a very intrinsic issue for Palestinians across the
It's a very
occupied
sensitive
territories.
issue, obviously, on the Palestinian street. Hashim, back here in the studio, take us through the process. What the Qatari mediating team understand is the process. What's supposed to happen? Who guarantees that everything goes by clockwork?
The Qataris, the Egyptians and the Americans are going to be the main guarantors of this deal. And this explains why, for example, Sami, since yesterday, we saw only one statement from the Qatari government. We saw the spokesperson also talking, praising the deal, but staying very cautious because they do understand it is going to be...
But none of them are there on the ground, right? And you were just beginning to talk about people being released from one point in Gaza, handed or moved further north. I mean, what is the mechanism for that?
They have their teams operating, for example, in the Rafah crossing. It's going to be a crucial point in this agreement. They will be liaising with the Egyptians, who will play a crucial role in the handover of the captives, and they are liaising with the Americans at the same time. So this is what is happening, and this is why, Sami, briefly, why it is an extreme, one perhaps of the most delicate operations that we're going to see. Hamas is insisting on no-fly zone in the southern part of the country, of Gaza Strip, for a reason. They don't want to see drones flying over, detecting the movement of their own people. And they're insisting on...
Have they got that guarantee from the understanding that of the officials that you've spoken to with the Qatari mediators, that there will be no aerial activity in southern Gaza?
I'll tell you what they say. It's a fast-moving, fluid situation. We'll only take it the moment it starts officially kicking in. There is a great deal of anxiety. Although there's optimism, there is a great deal of anxiety because of the complexity of this operation. What is happening, Sami, is this. You will see the movement of the captives and the prisoners. You have to ensure that the southern part is going to be no-fly zone. A 6-hour daytime no-fly window that starts from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., according to Hamas senior officials just a while ago, is a necessity for the movement of the people. Otherwise, this is not going to work.
Okay, that window you talk about is in the north of Gaza.
Is in the north.
Okay, hang on. Stay with me here. Rory, I want to bring you back in. Those sorts of details, from your understanding, from the signals we're getting from Israeli officials, has that been agreed to? No-fly zones in the south, 6-hour windows of no-fly zones in the north? And what about the legal process? Let's not forget all of this clockwork mechanism that I'm chatting about with Hashim. Does that take into account the legal process that Israel is going through in order to clear names for release?
Well, I mean, as Hashim was saying there, a lot of this is being worked out kind of in a very short space of time. And so legalities are the kinds of things that aren't really being necessary at the moment. You basically have two governments, well, at least, the Israeli government and Hamas, trying to work out what is acceptable for both parties, what is acceptable for people as well. Now, in terms of releasing of prisoners, that has to go through a certain amount of vetting, of course, and the names that the Israelis have of Palestinian prisoners who are going to be part of this deal, yes, they need to be looked at, and the Israelis have to be comfortable that these people are not serious offenders. And by that, the main criteria that's being put on it is they cannot be murderers. But there are people, mainly women, who are in that list who have been accused of attempted murder, stabbings and the like. And there are plenty of teenage boys who have been accused of throwing stones and rioting and lesser crimes like that. So essentially, the main criteria for the Israelis on this is no murderers to be included in that list. Of course, on the other side, when it comes to legalities of the captives that Hamas is going to be releasing, well, Israel has no control over that. Essentially, Hamas will come up with a list every day of 10 of their captives, women and children, and they will give those to the Israelis, and the Israelis will effectively take those captives back as and when they're released by Hamas. But they don't have any control over who exactly is going to be released at what time.
Right, so this is clearly a very much a process that will be working day by day, it sounds like, right? Hashim, What about aid? What has been agreed? Do you know, or do we know from when you speak with the Qatari mediators? How many trucks? Will it include fuel? I spoke a half an hour ago to an aid worker from the Palestinian Red Crescent who said her understanding was fuel will not be allowed to go to hospitals. What are you hearing?
It has not been decided yet. Tahir al-Nono, he's one of the senior Hamas officials just a while ago. He said that they are expecting to see 200 to 300 trucks crossing into Gaza on a daily basis, including trucks that are going to be 8 trucks carrying fuel that has to go everywhere, including hospitals. On that,
they're saying this Hamas official telling you that's what they're expecting, or that's what's been agreed?
This is what they are expecting. It's not been finalized, and this explains why, Sami, as we speak, the reason why you're getting this sense of cautious optimism about this deal is that even when they agree tonight, this is where we think the final agreement about the tiny details will be made. Tomorrow they will go to the ceasefire, each pretty much concerned about what's next. One final thought here, Sami. Since yesterday, it's the top leadership of Hamas which is coming publicly talking to the media about the details of this agreement. Why? They don't want to be seen as gambling on something that could potentially backfire if it fails. Massive destruction in the Gaza Strip. Huge loss of life. You cannot come out to the people and say, we have a deal, and then come back to them 2 days later and say, it totally collapsed. They do understand it's going to be an extremely
delicate
painful,
situation,
situation for them.
Just let's briefly go back to Zain, because Zain, you're in the West Bank. When we talk about the needs of the Palestinians, from your discussions with Palestinians, talk us through what their needs are when it comes to food, fuel. I mean, we're talking now about 200 to 300 trucks. I think that's about half what the daily average was before October the 7th, right?
That is correct. People continue to tell us that the obvious, absolute atrocities being carried out in Gaza, their friends, their families, people here feel very connected to what's happening there. They say that what they are watching happening seems absolutely impossible to fathom and out of control. And the help that needs to be going in simply is not enough and will not be enough going forward anytime soon. What has been cleared through the UN, through the Israeli government, to go in through the Rafah crossing, whatever the delivery means, it is an absolute trickle compared to the help they were receiving before the bombardment started, and absolutely not enough compared to what they need to receive now. When you speak to people here in the occupied West Bank, they say that their leaders haven't been doing enough. They say that the international community has failed them. And they say that no matter what happens next, even if their conditions improve, as long as there is this Israeli chokehold on the occupied territories, as long as Israel is able to do whatever it wants in Palestinian communities, be that in Gaza or in the occupied West Bank, something common we've heard from several people is they describe a sense of incomplete happiness. So even if they have their families back with this prisoner exchange, even if they are able to move forward somehow, their happiness will remain incomplete as long as these atrocities in Gaza continue to be carried out.
All right, let's thank all of our correspondents. Hashim Ahlabara here in the studio. We've got Zain, of course, and Rory. Thank you so much for coming together and pooling all of your collective knowledge and contacts and insight into this, to try and help us to understand exactly how things are supposed to unravel going forward. Thanks so much.